Hi, I'm Jack.
And I'm Joe.
You might remember us from First Warning.
But now you can catch us in podcast form.
Oh, no, you didn't! No, you didn't!
Oh, yes, we did. You're listening to the Jack and Joe podcast.
Tune in as we give our own hottest sports takes.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into the Jack and Joe podcast. I am Jack Delperdang, and joining me today is Joey Colbert.
Hey, Jack, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty well myself. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good.
On today's episode, we talk about how we became fans of the teams we root for, some of our favorite memories, and also some painful moments. We'll start with college football since that's our favorite sport. Joey, you're a Nebraska fan. What's one of your favorite moments from your Nebraska fandom?
Oh my goodness, there's so many great memories as a Husker fan. Just going down to Lincoln every year just to go to a Husker football game, sitting whatever I want in the stadium. You got 90,000 fans supporting Nebraska. You got the sellout streak. I think it's at 375 as of right now, but I've been to at least a Husker game every year. Now, in the last season, I got season tickets, so it was just crazy. But for favorite moments, I was at the Missouri game in 2010 against the Missouri Tigers in 2010. This was the game where Nebraska was number 14 and Missouri was number 6. They ended up winning that game 31-17. Roy Halou Jr. got the Nebraska all-time record for rushing yards in a game with, I think, let me pull it up, 305 yards, or 307 yards and 28 carries for 3 touchdowns, including 66-yard touchdown run, 73-yard touchdown run, and then a 53-yarder. Just 3 50-plus running plays. Just great game for that.
Would you say Roy Halou is one of the best running backs that you've seen in your lifetime in Nebraska?
Well, technically top 5. I think Amir Abdullah is the best I've seen. You also got Rex Burkhead in that crazy comeback win against Ohio State. And obviously the Amir Abdullah 200-yard game against Miami on the ground. And then also the McNeese State where Amir Abdullah got that big catch and just turned around, went through a bunch of defenders to win the game against McNeese State. That was a very close game.
Is there any other specific moment that you enjoyed as a fan?
Going to the games, yes. I was at the Miami game in 2014. That was an intense game. Obviously, this was a celebration of the 94-95 national championship team. On top of that, it's Miami. We beat them 20 years prior to that. So there was a couple fights going on in Lincoln between Randy Gregory and some Miami players. It was just an intense moment. Just obviously Nebraska and Miami hate each other. More Nebraska hating Miami because they kept losing to Miami all the time. But another game was the Oregon game. Tommy Armstrong got a big quarterback draw play, 2.5 minutes left. Scored a touchdown to beat Oregon by 3. After that game, the stadium went wild with the playing of the song of Let Me Clear My Throat. Everybody was dancing, singing around. It was a nice 80-degree day outside at Memorial Stadium. It was just a beautiful atmosphere.
And now moving on to the darker side of Nebraska football, if you can say that. What is some of the bad memories that you've had?
Definitely some of the toughest memories came in the conference championship game. I'll start with the first one I remember was in 2009 against number 3 Texas. This was when Nebraska had maybe one of the best defensive team of all time in Lincoln. They had Ndamukong Suh, Barry Turner, Jared Crick, Philip Dillard, Larry Asante, and much more. Just that team was so good. Their offense was obviously bad. A year later, the offense got Taylor Martinez, but the defense was just amazing. Just every time Ndamukong Suh gets a tackle or sacks the quarterback, you get the Sioux chant, and he did that in Dallas against the Longhorns to Colt McCoy. I don't remember. He got like 4 or 3 sacks on Colt McCoy. It was the week before the Heisman ceremony, but Nebraska only kicked 4 field goals in that game. They couldn't do anything. Obviously, Zach Lee was the quarterback. He wasn't that great at all, but they had Roy Hillou Jr., Rex Burkhead. They could run the football, but Texas was a great team, and obviously it came down to the fourth quarter. Nebraska forced a turnover. DeJon Gomes got an interception on when Texas was in field goal range, and that led to a Alex Henry field goal, 42 yards with 1:44 seconds left. Then the kickoff happened. Aldi Kanalik, he was a really good kicker, but this was one of his worst moments. Kicks the ball out of bounds. Obviously, that is a penalty, so Texas starts at the 40-yard line. Followed that was a horse collar penalty on Prince Amukamara. So Texas in field goal range, 7 seconds left. They have a timeout. Colt McCoy snaps the ball, moves to his right. Sue's pressuring him, throws the ball out of bounds. Clock hit 0. I remember at that moment I was watching the game with my dad. I thought the game was over. And then Mac Brown hold up his finger saying, there needs to be 1 second left. I remember Bo Pelini celebrating, thinking that Nebraska won. Then Mac Brown halts that celebration with the 1 second. Obviously, the ball hit the ground with 1 second left, and Texas hit the field goal to win the game.
For everything. Got it. Texas goes to Pasadena.
That was one of the worst moments for me. And then obviously the next year was Nebraska playing Oklahoma. They were up 17-0 against Oklahoma, and then Oklahoma came back 123 to 20. That was a good year for Nebraska, but that title game was bad. And then another conference title game. The last one I'll say is the Big Ten title game. Nebraska losing to Wisconsin. They just ran over Nebraska. That was just awful.
Here's the handoff. Gordon getting around the corner. He's got all sorts of running room. At the 40. Still on his feet. Breaks it back. How about this? On Wisconsin. Touchdown on their opening drive. 56 yards.
All right, Jack. So I talked about my success and failures as watching as a Nebraska fan. Some of the best moments and worst moments. You are an Iowa fan, obviously a rival of Nebraska. What are some of the best moments you had as an Iowa fan?
I think the best moment for me came in 2016. Iowa wasn't having the best year, and it was in November, and Michigan came to Kinnick Stadium, and they were ranked number 3 in the nation with Jim Harbaugh. They were a great team. They were in the driver's seat to win the Big Ten East, and Iowa beat them 14-13 on a last-second field goal by Keith Duncan.
Right through, and the Hawkeyes have stunned the Wolverines. Michigan unbeaten no more.
The fans rushed the field. That night I did not, which I wish that I would have, but it was still a great night. Another one that stood out was in 2009, Iowa started the season 11-0, or 10-0, excuse me, and they ended up playing in the Orange Bowl, and they beat Georgia Tech that year. That was a really cool moment. And then in 2015, when they went 12-0, they capped a 12-0 season in Lincoln. I was actually able to be at that game, and they went to the Big Ten tournament, or the Big Ten championship, excuse me, and then they ended up in the Rose Bowl against Stanford.
So, what were some of the difficult moments for you as an Iowa fan?
Yeah, one of the difficult moments was in that 2015 season that I was talking about. It felt magical. They were 12-0. And then in the Big Ten championship game against Michigan State, they had a deep pass to Tavon Smith, Iowa did, and I thought that they were going to win the game. But then Michigan State went on an 8-minute drive, which was capped off by an L.J. Scott 2-yard touchdown run.
L.J. Scott, the deep man. L.J. Scott running right. No, did he get in? Again, yes! Touchdown Spartans! What strength by the true freshman!
That was one of the most painful memories of me being an Iowa fan. And I also think back to that 2009 season when they started 10-0. That there was a home game against Northwestern, and they ran a bootleg in their own end zone. and Ricky Stanzi got injured, and their backup quarterback just wasn't ready, and they ended up losing to Northwestern and then Ohio State in the next game in Columbus to not win the Big Ten championship. Now moving on to the NFL, where again we root for rival teams. Joey, you're a Packers fan. I root for the Vikings. I'll start with you. How did you become a Packers fan, and who would be your favorite player, like in the Packers organization, all time?
It's kind of a weird way for me to become a Packers fan. It was about 2006 or 7. There was a video game. I think Brett Favre was on the cover. He was obviously wearing the Green Bay uniform. So I thought the colors were very appealing to me. I just loved the look. So I said, I'll take them. But then 2009, around the end of the season is when I kind of watched them for the first time. This was one of the bad moments when the Packers were in the playoffs in the wild card against the Arizona Cardinals. This game went to overtime. It was tied at 45. Packers had the ball first. Rodgers gets sacked. He gets sacked and fumbles the football. Arizona returns it for a touchdown to win the game, obviously eliminating the Packers.
I remember that was a high-scoring game, too, and a lot of people thought that once the Packers got the ball to start overtime that they were going to win because it was such an offensive game.
Yeah, obviously it was one of the highest-scoring playoff games ever, as you said. And then following a year later, I didn't really pay attention until close to the end of the season. This was like when I think the earliest memory I had for that season was that Bears game, that Week 17. They needed a win. They needed help. They beat the Bears at Lambeau Field 10-3. Just a very low-scoring game to get into the playoffs. And then, obviously, that playoff run to go to the Super Bowl, they had to go to Philadelphia, beat Michael Vick. I think I got to look at the score, but they had to go on the road 3 times before going to Dallas to face the Steelers. Let's see. They beat Michael Vick 21-16 in Philadelphia. Then a week later, they faced the top-seeded Atlanta Falcons, and they just destroyed them 48-21. Rodgers probably had one of his best playoff games ever in that game. And then, obviously, the biggest game of all, the NFC title game at Chicago against Jay Cutler until he got hurt. And then he didn't really come back in the game. The Packers struggled, but they won 21-14. Probably one of the greatest plays I remember was B.J. Raji's pick 6 that capped off the win.
On 3rd down and 5, pressure, pass is picked off, and who is it? Big B.J. Raji for the touchdown.
Yeah, obviously you've had some great moments as a Packers fan. That Super Bowl obviously sticking out. What would you say is maybe a low light of your fandom?
Well, the low light for that would be obviously the years after winning that Super Bowl. The first one I want to mention is 2011 season because I got to go to Kansas City and see the Packers play. Packers went 15-1 in that regular season. Their only loss was the game I was at, which was at Kansas City. And Kansas City was pretty bad, and I think that they were led by intern coach Romeo Cornell. But I think, I totally forgot who was the quarterback in that game. He was on the Bills, he was on the Broncos, but whenever the Packers play this quarterback, he always win. But 2014, the NFC title game, this was a very ugly game. The Packers were up 16-0 in the game. It all started in the fourth quarter with the fake field goal touchdown pass to get momentum for Seattle. And then they scored another touchdown. It was 19-14. And there comes the onside kick where Brandon Bostic, who is supposed to block for Jordy Nelson, decides to try to catch the ball, and he tips it. Seattle player was able to recover right away. Marshawn Lynch scores a touchdown, and Packers had to hit a field goal to go to overtime, but Seattle got the ball first. I knew right away that Seattle's Russell Wilson's going to march down the field to win the game. Then said it right there with that touchdown pass to Jermaine Kearse that got me locked in my room for a few days.
Wilson toward the end zone. It is caught. Seattle's going to the
Super Bowl, Jermaine Kearse.
And obviously, another bad moment was 2015. I mean, there were some great moments in that year. Obviously, Rodgers threw a couple Hail Marys. The first one was Detroit at the Motor City Miracle.
Rodgers in trouble. It's going to get there. He turned 32 yesterday. Does he have a vintage moment in him? In the end zone, it is caught for the win.
He threw a 60-yard pass to Richard Rodgers. He was supposed to block for Randall Cobb, but he caught it. But the second Hail Mary, there was two Hail Marys in the divisional round game against Arizona. But after the Hail Mary to Jeff Janis, the Cardinals got the ball, and then Larry Fitzgerald went off on one play to win the game on the next play. But Packers just had some bad postseason. Mostly the postseason has been a terrible memory for me. I'm sure you had good memories and bad memories in postseason play and regular season for Minnesota. So what for you, Jack, what are some of the greatest memories you had as a Minnesota Viking fan?
Yeah, obviously the Vikings have never won a Super Bowl. They're one of the only teams in the NFL to not accomplish that feat. So I can't say that that's a great memory, but one of the best memories is just 2 years ago, 2017, the 2017-18 season, when they were playing the New Orleans Saints, and they were down, and then they had the last-second play to Stephon Diggs, the Minneapolis Miracle.
Keenum steps into it. Pass is caught. Diggs! Sideline! Touchdown! Unbelievable! Vikings win it!
Just one of the best plays, one of the more lucky plays, but it seemed like everything was going wrong late in that game, and then the Vikings pulled one out. And then this year, I would say, against the Saints again, Kyle Rudolph had the good comeback, and then it went to overtime, and Kirk Cousins throws a fade pass to Kyle Rudolph, and the Vikings beat the Saints. It's weird because a lot of the Vikings moments came against the Saints, and that's where also one of the toughest memories came was in the 2009-2010 season. They were playing the Saints, and it was late in the game, tie game, and Brett Favre throws an interception over the middle.
Brett Favre goes back to pass. He pumps. Now he fires over the middle. Intercepted. I can't believe what I'm seeing right now. It was intercepted by Tracy Porter, near side to the 40, and John Sullivan runs him down at the 47-yard line. You've got to be kidding me. I can't believe what I just saw.
I really thought the Vikings were going to win this game, but the Saints ended up getting the ball in overtime and then going and kicking a field goal, which made me unhappy because the Saints went to the Super Bowl and then they ended up beating the Indianapolis Colts. And I really felt that if the Vikings had won against the Saints, that they could have won that Super Bowl.
I mean, you can take a knee and try a 56-yard field goal. This is not Detroit, man. This is the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and Brett Favre could have retired probably after that year, retiring as a two-time Super Bowl champion, since he only got his lone Super Bowl again for the Packers in, I think in '95 against the Patriots, 35-21. But yeah, that was got to be a very tough moment for you. I'm sure. Yeah, for both of us, we had experienced tough moments as fans in the postseason, like the overtime stuff. Obviously, in both games against Seattle, we both had to experience tough moments against Seattle. Like I got the Jermaine Kearse, the Brandon Bostic botched onside kick, and obviously,
yeah, that was one that I had forgot even was the Vikings against the Seahawks that same year. Blair Walsh, they had like a 20-yard field goal to win the game basically, and he missed it left, which one of the more heartbreaking moments, but I don't really think the Vikings were Super Bowl contenders that year, but doesn't mean that it didn't hurt any less because they really should have won that game.
I'm just so confused how we are friends right now, Jack, because for some reason, we root for the teams that hate each other, like Nebraska and Iowa. I mean, it wasn't like that until Nebraska joined the Big Ten. So, I mean, right now Iowa has Nebraska's number in football, so you got the bragging rights over me for that. But I got the bragging rights for you for the NFL. I mean, the last 2 years before this season, Vikings obviously had that bragging rights, and then Green Bay's back to the top of the NFC North. So,
yeah, sports can turn on a dime at any moment, as we've seen over the years. I think that's going to do it for us today. Thank you so much for joining us.
see you next time.
See you next time. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Jack and Joe podcast.
It's my turn! You told me it was my turn!
Sorry, Skip. Better luck next time.